it may be as we think through faith and finance and mental health, it might be for some of us that there's some extra questions that crop up in ourselves that are quite of a personal nature. There might be issues that we recognise that we want to deal with at some time. And so just ask us all as we enter into this process, just to be able to take responsibility for our own well-being, take responsibility for whatever our thoughts and questions are. And even at this stage, be thinking, well, who am I going to talk about afterwards, after this event, about how it's been for me, so that whatever's going on in yourself at this time, it's not something that you're left with on your own, it's something that we're able to share with other people. And just in saying that and saying we're all in this together, it is a matter of saying, whatever our own personal experience is, this is an opportunity to learn from other people's experience. And really delighted that 4 different people of different faith backgrounds are able to make some of their own experience, their own journey known and shared with us. In fact, for myself, reflecting on the first occasion when we had a seminar, symposium on faith and finance, there was so much to learn from people who were of different faith traditions. It was absolutely fascinating to be able to see both similarities and differences between the way people with different faiths resource their background, resource their life, were able to draw on their experience, draw on their community to cope with issues around finance. And today we take that one step further with a particular focus on mental health, which was one of the key questions that emerged from that conversation, to say we'd like to focus, we'd like to go deeper on that particular aspect of how faith and finance impact each other. So today we're going to structure it in terms of having 2 spoken contributions, followed by a time for questions, then another 2, followed by a time of further questions, and then an opportunity for us all to reflect together at the very end, if we'd like to do so. And our first speaker is going to be part of an interview. Shaz Akhtar, who many of you already know, is going to be interviewing Gulbaks Kaur, who runs, who's from Positive Participation in Wolverhampton, and has got a work that brings her around the mental well-being of particularly the Asian communities in that great city, and also has a particular interest in dementia, something that has been very much part of our work as well. Following that, we're going to hear from Cassius himself, and Cassius, who is our Just Finance Development worker, is also a minister in the Wesleyan Holiness Church. And so Cassius and Shaz interviewing Gulbaks are going to be our first pair. Questions and answers to follow that. And then Qatar Singh, who was a contribution to our first seminar, and we really appreciated what he had to say there. And he has got a particular area of experience as a mental health chaplain, is going to be something of that from his particular Sikh faith. Towards the end then, we're going to have a focus from the Muslim community, and precisely who that's going to be, I'll just hold out until that time, because there's a little bit of uncertainty around that. But having introduced those speakers and invited you, as you listen to our first interview, to put any questions you have in the chat function, please then, Shaz, I welcome and invite you to interview Gulbaks Kaur.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to being part of this event this morning. So, Sister, tell us a bit more about your organisation, Positive Participation. What is it all about?
Positive Participation really was set up about 20 years ago. My background is actually auditing in automotive industry for places like Jaguar Land Rover, and one day 20 years ago, when I entered one of our local sites, I found that there was a significantly disproportionate number of people from BAME communities who were not getting the service that they were supposed to for mental health. There was very limited understanding of how BAME communities really saw mental health, their treatment regimes, and how faith was an integral part of their recovery. The Eurocentric model didn't seem to fit any of those, so I just decided I'm not going back to auditing. I'm going to utilise the skills that I've got to try and make a contribution and a difference to individuals' mental health, where I can actually begin to see people moving towards recovery. So I just made a total change in what I do from a consultant out in automotive to now a award-winning mental health practitioner in Wolverhampton and indeed the West Midlands.
Wow, you do some amazing work, sis, because I've been looking at your website and I've obviously been working really closely with you as well. And you've got such a wealth of experience in the mental health sector. Now, looking back at your journey through engaging with Asian communities, and most recently, you've opened your services to the wider public. How do you think a person's faith informs attitudes towards mental health?
I think faith is a great source of comfort, particularly during these very, very difficult times. I think in times where we feel that we have something like the global pandemic that is happening at the moment, if all else fails, absolutely people turn to their faith. And actually, it's also the very first place that many people turn to in order to seek comfort. I know that before this quarantine, before this lockdown that we entered, we began to hear about this possibility that we may be going into lockdown. And I can remember going to my local Gurdwara and saying to the committee, oh, well, do you know what? Let the lockdown come. I'll be so glad because I can spend more time here and enjoy being in a place of worship, not realizing actually they were also going to have to lock down. And I find that in times when things are difficult and in times where we just need to connect, we all turn to faith. At some point or another, and for many people faith is an integral part of their journey to recovery.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Gerbax. Faith is a great healer and most certainly a great source of comfort for many people during difficult times in their lives. I personally can relate to that too, actually, and I'm sure many of our listeners will agree too. That really leads nicely to my next question, Gerbax. How do you think a person's faith informs attitudes towards finance?
I think faith and finance, you cannot escape from the fact that the two are going to be integrally intertwined, because when you look at difficult times, if we look around us, we've got a global pandemic, there's so much poverty, so much uncertainty, so much worry around what are we going to do? Where will we get fed from? How will we be able to pay our mortgage? What if I lose my job? Some real core issues there. When we look at faith, it's absolutely tied into a great source of comfort that we seek in faith, the faith in God, the fact that, you know, it doesn't matter, God will find a way through, we will survive this, there's a journey. I know that David spoke earlier about a journey that we all go on where, you know, we're all in this together. Actually, for everybody, irrespective of whichever faith you come from, we're all on this collective journey, this journey of hope as I see it. And at the end of that, and throughout that, I feel that for all of us, faith is a great comfort. It's also a great healer. But also, I feel personally connected quite strongly to faith because it will guide me through no matter how difficult that pathway is. I can see that light at the end of everything. There's some really difficult times, and although I've never struggled with mental health, I was saying to you a couple of weeks ago, I said that actually this time around during quarantine, because I'm so socially connected with people, I love hugging, I love meeting people, I love the idea that we can walk through a high street, talk to so many people, go into churches, mosques, gurdwaras, and connect with so many people on different levels. Even I've struggled with my mental health indoors. And from the very outset, I've seen many people struggling, but what has come through is places of worship, faith, different organisations, institutions, all coming together collectively to take people along that pathway and give them hope.
Yeah, it's been really nice seeing different faith organisations during these difficult times coming together and supporting each other and people around them, regardless of faith and diversity they may be. So, Gerbax, we've talked about how faith can play a supporting role in person's mental health and finance. In the light of your answers, my final question to you this morning would be, how do you think the practical aspects of a person's faith help to support them during times of anxiety or financial uncertainty?
I think if we look around us, we've got some wonderful, wonderful examples of how faith and finance have worked together. Look at all the food banks that we've had. Look at all the organisations that have come together to support people who, at the very basic level of need, food, have been able to provide food parcels for people. You know, we've got Elias Matu Foundation, you know, the Sikh Toy Appeal, we've got the Gurdwaras, the mosques, the churches coming together. It's been wonderful. There's been this collective journey where people have faced anxiety, primarily centered around uncertainty. You know, what will we do? How will we feed ourselves? How can we go out without getting infected? What will we do if we come across somebody? What happens if we lose somebody? You know, bereavement, all of these things, you know, but at a base level where there's been bereavement, how will we be able to either bury, cremate, or manage our loved ones' funerals? You know, all sorts of costs that are inconceivable, such a wide variety of them. I've had people who, for the first time, I've seen a massive increase in the people that are worrying about losing their jobs. You know, furlough hasn't lifted yet. You know, and saying, well, as we come to the end of furlough, what if I haven't got a job? We're already seeing mass redundancies, and that's been really, really difficult for people. But at the end of it all, we've got to say that they've had faith as that guide, but it's been incredibly difficult, a very, very difficult journey for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Gerbax. So I think most people of faith will lead towards their beliefs during times of uncertainty. Thank you so much for your time today, sister. Highly appreciated. Over to you, David.
Gerbax, thank you so much for all you've been able to share there to set the scene, both from your own personal experience and your 20 years of being dedicated to the mental well-being of those of BAME communities. Really appreciate all that's brought for people, and for highlighting themes that I know will be picked up by others during our time, whether it's the way in which faith can respond to anxiety and concerns, be that around food, about jobs, about financial matters, whatever it is at this time. And that encouraging end to say faith communities time and time again with that message of hope, with that message of we're holding out for something that gives us a context in which we can face the future and deal with the present. Really appreciate that. I'm going to now turn to my colleague Cassius Francis. I say Cassius, he works with us as Just Finance Development Worker, addressing issues of financial concern around the Black country, but also he's a minister in the Wesleyan Holiness Church, and so he brings that experience to bear as well. So Cassius, absolutely delighted to welcome you, and I very much look forward to what you're going to be saying to us as well.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's really great to be able to share with you all this morning from sunny Birmingham as I look out of the window. Just to give you a little bit of context, before I started this role with Transforming Communities Together about 2 years ago, I was a minister in Wolverhampton in pastoral ministry for a congregation in Chapel Ash, and spent 3 years there. And I've also had my own challenges with mental health, particularly around times of bereavement on a personal level, and so yeah, it's really great to be able to just share with you a little bit from my perspective as a Christian minister for this morning. So yeah, bringing a range of perspectives to this subject when I reflect on the issues of money and mental health. Worries about money can naturally lead to an increase in anxiety and deterioration in our mental health and well-being. And the mental health charity Mind describes a kind of vicious cycle where Worrying about money makes mental health worse, but also poor mental health means managing money is harder, and this cycle can kind of spiral if we're not careful and don't maybe get access to the help and support that's needed. There's plenty of evidence now to show that people with mental health problems are 3.5 times more likely to be in problem debt. And with coronavirus and the lockdown, as a Christian minister, I'm more concerned about both of these perspectives and the potential for a vicious cycle. So for people who, one, will be worrying, as Gerbat's just shared, and maybe have not had to worry about money before, but also those who have struggled with their mental health previously and may not be in the best position to manage their finances. In terms of my faith and how this supports me during times of difficulty, I'm firstly reminded of a scripture in the New Testament and a book called Acts. And this is essentially where the church was born, the Christian church was born. In Acts chapter 2, it says, all believers in Jesus were together and had everything in common. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to everyone as he had need. And so there's a clear sense in terms of my faith and being part of a Christian community that's meant then and means today that I should share what I have and care for my brothers and sisters, but also be provided for in times of hardship. We believe in a God who is a provider. He will supply all of our needs according to his riches in glory, is what another scripture says in the book of Philippians. And even long before those verses were recorded, part of our Old Testament scriptures or the Hebrew Bible make it clear on the responsibility that those that have plenty have to provide for those who have less. So in a book called Leviticus, chapter 19, it says, when you reap the harvest of the land, do not reap the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. So in a very practical sense, and with my understanding of who God is as a Christian, I should have hope about financial provision. And that was really helpful to hear reiterated in what Gerbat was sharing earlier as well. However, we also know within our Christian communities that there can be a stigma about people who share about their vulnerability about mental health. And there are also theological challenges for us as Christians. So, for example, the Bible says that the fruit of God's Holy Spirit includes joy and peace in Galatians chapter 5. So some will say that true Christians should not suffer from mental health problems. And certainly, you know, from my own personal experience, sharing as a Christian minister about some of the challenges that I experienced personally, where, you know, it came with difficulties because not everybody wants to see that in their minister, a level of vulnerability around mental health. But I felt and still feel that it's important to be honest as a leader and be upfront about some of the challenges that I may experience, and hopefully allow members of my congregation or members of the community to be more open and perhaps about the challenges that they experience as well. Also, when it comes to healing, there are big differences between different congregations and also within our congregations. Some Christians have a very strong faith healing model, and others are much more cautious about what we can expect this side of heaven. The Bible too shows us a mixed picture. So some verses appear to offer us power to pronounce complete healing, while others suggest that suffering and pain will continue to be our reality in this life. There are some encouraging signs and resources that are helping us to open up conversations. So one example is a course, a livability course, a 6-week Bible study that explores God's heart for mental health and just opens up opportunities to have conversations around what scriptures say and what our faith teaches us, but what people's lived experiences are. When it comes to money worries, those struggling with their mental health, as we've said, may not be willing or may not be capable of sharing about the problems that they're having regarding their finances. And in extreme spiritual cases, there can be a sense of relinquishing all personal responsibility around financial problems and others, in the belief that God will just supply everything that's needed. And these challenges are complex and require a lot more of skill than I, as a young minister, know completely. I'm still very much on a journey of learning. But if I was writing a letter to my younger self, as I was thinking in preparation for this presentation, one, I would think about making sure that I present a balanced theology. I think is really critical for me as a Christian minister. So both promoting faith in a God who provides everything that we need, and an expectation, but also an expectation that we do the best with the resources that we have and accessing the help that we may need. Also working to create an environment in my church and in my community where we can talk openly about mental health, well-being and money. And thirdly, recognizing the limitations of my own experience and expertise. So it's great on a forum like this to be able to hear from and learn from people with different experience. Also to find out a bit about different organizations working in our communities that we might be able to access when we need support. And then just some final reflections, because I can't ignore the other aspects of my identity as a Black man. I'm well aware that I'm part of a group that is overrepresented in our mental health services. Evidence shows that Black men are more likely than others to be diagnosed with severe mental health problems, and also are far more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Research shows that Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities are more likely to experience poverty, have poorer educational outcomes, higher unemployment, and contact with the criminal justice system. So amongst 16 to 24-year-olds, unemployment is highest for people from Black backgrounds, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, in comparison to white counterparts. And even when employed, men and women from some ethnic minority communities are paid less on average than those with similar qualifications and experience. Homelessness is also a key factor among minority ethnic groups, with 37% of statutory homeless households from BME backgrounds. So each of these can act as risk factors in terms of the development of mental health problems, and I think it's important to place those in this context. Also, the Race Equality Foundation says that men from African and Caribbean backgrounds are overrepresented in those mental health services. They come to the attention of services via the police and the criminal justice system, and are far more likely to receive harsher end of services such as seclusion, control and restraint. But there is hope. There is hope. And I was really impressed and encouraged to hear that from Gerbax as well, in terms of faith foundation, but also for mine as a Christian. There is a song that has been shared with me. I hope that we'll be able to play it a little bit later, called But I Fly, by a Christian minister in Wolverhampton, Reverend Paul Gray. And the inspiration behind the song comes from his 30 years of experience previously, when he went into the mental health system aged 20, often at the hands of the police. The mental health unit, in the mental health unit, he'd be put on medication and placed in a seclusion cell. Today, Reverend Paul is married with 3 children. He runs his own business. He is a minister himself with the New Testament Church of God in Low Hill in Wolverhampton. And his song is a song of inspiration, But I Fly, and talks about his struggles, but also about the hope that he has, the strength that he gained through his faith. So to finish, I can say that my Christian faith gives me a firm grounding to support me in times of financial challenges. And I know that there are many who can share stories like Reverend Gray. However, the issues of finance and mental health are clearly complex and in much greater need of more work. So really pleased to be able to learn from and contribute to this conversation today. So thanks very much for listening.
Cassius, thank you so much indeed for adding your experience, your reflections, your thoughts, and indeed something of your own very self into that conversation that goes alongside Gerbax's great introduction that sets the scene for us all to reflect together on how faith, finance and mental health interact with each other. We're going to have a short time at the moment here to invite questions and comments, either directed directly to Cassius or to Gerbax, or made in more general. And then what I'll try and do is I'll try and invite a couple of questions first, and then say to Cassius, Gerbax, do they want to respond to those? Albia, do you want to just make that comment that you've sent round in a chat message to us all?
Yes, I was very inspired that Cassius was honest and open about sharing his feelings. And I think it's important for the public to acknowledge that we in lead roles, ministers, employers, maybe we're wealthy, that we're not immune to everything that's going on. We can also face these problems. And I think if they see us, they interact with us more, they open up to us more. And I think that was extremely important. Instead of trying to, as I often do, try to hide my feelings, my problems, thinking, no, I'm here to support them. I cannot show my weaker point, and perhaps they're not able to resonate with me as much as they possibly could have done if I had actually told them, oh yes, I've been through this, and this is how I this is how I helped myself. And the other point I just wanted to mention was going back to Gerbax about faith. I don't know if you remember, shortly after the lockdown, and you mentioned about the song that you're going to share with us as well. The Sikh community, they released a song, and it was a lovely shabad, please forgive us, God. And it was the words were so powerful that anybody that sat and listened to that music, and the way it was sort of the shabad was sang, they could understand that we were asking God, enough is enough, forgive us now for all our mistakes. You know, let us come through this. We're losing too many loved ones. And I do think that those sort of things being shared with the BMA communities are so important for us to gel together at these times, and sort of lean on each other's shoulders, so to speak, to see us through this.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, and I hope either yourself or even James might find that song online and just share the link before the end of our time together. Is there anybody else who's got a particular comment they want or a question they want to ask at this stage in our time together? Either just make it known on chat or use that raised hand function that's in the participant section.
Hello, I'd like to please. I put something in the chat, but I don't think you've seen it.
Thank you. Please do give us your question, please.
I've noticed since I've been reaching out on the LGBT Sparkle social group, we've been getting different faiths and religions reaching out, and they feel like they're isolated, and they've come onto our Zoom chat and connected with us. So I can understand, that people that have got different faiths and religions, they want to connect with us.
Thank you, Paul. That's really important. Paul's part of the LGBT Sparkle group, based in Wolverhampton, I think, if I'm right there. So thank you very much indeed. Anybody else got a comment or question at this stage? And then I'll go back to Cassius and Gobax in case they've got responses they want to make to what's been said.
Yeah, sorry, I just wondered if I could ask a quick question. Just wondered what the speakers would recommend if I had a friend or maybe somebody in my family who was feeling a little bit low, maybe a little bit anxious, particularly around lockdown or COVID. And are there any kind of simple strategies that would be helpful for me to engage with my friend or family member?
Thank you very much indeed. Three very different comments there. One just talking about the importance of leaders modelling vulnerability. One, the way in which during this particular period of time and anxiety, support groups like LGBT Group Sparkle are extra important. And that question from James in terms of practical advice on how to draw on faith during the time of anxiety. Cassius, yourself first, then Gobax, and then thank you very much. Cassius.
Yeah, thanks for the question, James, and for those comments earlier. I think one of the things that I have tried to do, and we've seen across different faith communities, is making sure that we're maintaining contact with different, particularly isolated individuals. I appreciate that we're all in this together, and that comment was repeated at the start of this, but I also recognize that we're going through this in different boats is the term that I've heard. We're all in different circumstances, and so I think for someone who's struggling, James, I think really taking the time to be able to connect and to listen. I like Gerbax. I'm a person who've realised that I miss the hugs, I miss the physical contact with people, but I recognise the connections in other ways. So whether it is the phone calls, that there are lots of us who might be tired of Zoom calls now, but sometimes that's the only way that we've been able to connect with people, and just to take time to listen. To try and get some understanding of the different circumstances that people are living through. I feel really blessed here. I've got my internet connection, so I'm able to speak to you all. Not everybody has that. Some people will only have access to a telephone. They may even struggle for the data or the money to put credit on the phone. So they've got those phone calls. So it may even be, standing 2 meters away from your neighbour's front door so that you can have a conversation. But I think those connections, if we can make them, are just really important, and allowing people to know that there is help available as well.
Cassius, it's Jill Fenner here. Hi. Can you hear me? Because I'm
Yes.
conscious that I've not got a very good signal up here in North Wales. But what you're all saying, because now I work across the country, as I said to you the other day, I'm regional coordinator for the Midlands for Parish Nurse Ministries UK, and also for the Southwest. So everything you're saying is exactly the same across the country. I'm constantly speaking to the nurses down in the Southwest as far as Land's End, and they're all experiencing the same problems. And what I'm becoming more and more conscious of is that the carers, it's caring for those carers that we need to be thinking about. And a lot of people, the carers that are working in nursing homes, are constantly worried about losing their jobs now, because so many people have died in nursing homes. The nursing homes are now having to make redundancies, so it's a snowball effect. They're constantly worried about the finances, and as a result of it, their mental health is suffering, and then they're unable to work because of how they feel. So it is one vicious circle, really.
Yeah.
But it's not common just to us in the Midlands. It's across the country.
Yeah.
I think I shared with you the other day that the people down in St Goran, Cornwall, are now expecting to see people going on holiday down there.
Yeah.
And they're mega worried and concerned about the fact that the people from the Midlands are going to be coming down there on holiday and bringing the virus down there with them. So it is. There's so much fear out there. Yeah.
I think that there is a lot of fear and anxiety, and appreciate that point, Gillian. From the perspective of the work that I do with transforming communities together, and if you haven't seen our website, please do check it. Please do sign up for updates. Just to say that anybody who is concerned about finances, and we appreciate that will be a lot of people at this stage, that there is free help that is available. There's quality information and advice. And again, as a starting point, I would always say that if we're able to share what our concerns are, that it's much better for our mental health and well-being rather than holding it in. Because I've experienced trying to do that in the past, and know that it certainly isn't any good for my mental health and well-being. Sharing is much better. So yeah, please do reassure folks that you come into contact with that there is help available.
Thanks, Cassius. I think Sam had a point to make around that as well. If we could go to Sam next.
Hi, Sam.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to contribute in terms of people that are sitting back and not knowing where they can access the support they require. And just to make the point that all of us that are leading in organizations also have the capacity to share whatever information we've got as much as we can, not to rely on people having to go to .gov.uk site where everything is numbered, to make sure that those of us that are leading various organizations have a portal or have a way you're sharing whatever that is going to help others in your own circle, in your own organization, or people around you, that so that they don't lose out. There are many people, as a business organization, we've been finding that people are so much not in the know. Even the little grants that the government or the local authorities are given, many of them actually fall out of the system because they don't even know.
Yeah.
Before they get the information, it becomes too late to apply.
Mm-hmm.
So I just encourage everyone to, if you get the information about how you can help and support the people around, whether they belong to your organization or not, do share. Just as Cassius you just said, sharing is better, especially sharing from people on the know, people who are actually getting that information direct from the local authorities or from the government, so that, and then directing them how they can apply for any of those supports. Because I know there are people who would know that there is this support, but they don't know how they can apply to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of people from our own communities have actually lost out in most of these funds that have been given out by government or local authorities, because one, they don't get the information well in time, or they don't really know how they can apply. So I've just encouraged people to look out for one another and be able to share whatever information you get, especially in the area of help and support. There's a lot being done about food bank and sharing food parcels, which is great. But in the terms of people getting actual grants to do whatever they're doing, a lot of people have been losing out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that there were some key points there spoken about throughout the conversations. I think the first point is that we need to be able to open up a conversation, look for subtle changes in behaviour, mood states, somebody becoming slightly lower in mood, maybe sleeping more, sleeping less, changes in patterns. Open up those conversations. I agree, it's so important that we can manage some of those initial difficulties within the home, recognise those signs, begin to talk to that individual, connect with them, ask them how they're feeling, what is it that perhaps that you can do, what is it that they're worrying about, because we are in times of great uncertainty. And I think also to have a look on different mental health sites. I think certainly after listening in here, we will begin to share more of the resources that we've got, services that we know that are available. If the person doesn't feel comfortable perhaps seeking professional help from the GP, or is unable to access services because actually the waiting lists before we went into lockdown were between 6, 9, 12 months. So can you imagine, as we lift this veil, you know, we're going to have a huge crisis on our hands in terms of mental health. And I agree, there is a great stigma, but if we're talking, we're connecting, we're looking for some of those signs of mental ill health, persuade somebody to seek maybe support in their community from community organisations, connect with those organisations, perhaps persuade them to go to their GP. But also, I think it's so important, like we said, sharing information, being able to connect people. So I will take on board all of those comments, and thank you to everybody who shared those comments. We will now, I think, increase the amount of information that we're able to share. And I'm so glad that I joined everybody here today. I think my greatest fear was I don't know how to use technology, but this is an incredible way to connect with individuals. And I'm hearing everything that's being said, but talking, looking out for those symptoms, those are the sorts of resources that we'll begin to share. And we are aware that there are additional emergency response services that are being put in to support mental health. Let's see if we can connect individuals to those. If you don't feel comfortable, then there is always our organisation. We are beginning to pick up funding to be able to support people across communities, irrespective of which background you come from. One of the things that I hear is around stigma. I heard this comment about, people going from the Midlands, going to holiday down south. I'm hearing a lot of discourses around this worry about, are BAME people disproportionately affected? Are they the ones that have got the virus? Are they likely to carry this virus? Fears that are integrally integrated within some form of discrimination, you know, stay away from BAME communities. And this is not myself talking, but things that we've collected through different groups that I'm in. This fear that actually maybe BAME people are responsible for this. You know, is it China, the Chinese, let's avoid them. These are really uncomfortable things that we're beginning to see through the emergence of this virus. And I hope that that's something else that we can also begin to focus on, because people are afraid to come out because of other people's reactions. You know, hold up, Leicester went into lockdown. What about Wolverhampton? I wonder if Birmingham's going to follow. So we're actually increasing other types of mental health here surrounding the suppositions about who is responsible. How are we more likely to catch it? That is also impacting mental health incredibly. And it's a really interesting conversation that we've had within this group about, you know, people from the Midlands going to South, might they take that virus with them? What about the spread of that virus? We've all seen Bournemouth and the beaches in Bournemouth. You know, that was just everybody going, irrespective. But there is this fear around this connection between BAME, susceptibility, the number of deaths. And this has also increased a very different type of discriminatory bias towards the fear of catching the virus from people in BAME communities. But I will certainly, I've heard everything and I will be sharing those resources, but keep talking, keep looking for those signs, keep looking for those symptoms early on. If we don't know what they are, we'll certainly begin to share some of that resource and data so that people can identify those symptoms and signs earlier. And also, if you don't want to use a local community organisation, consider the GP and look at other organisations that have been set up rapidly to respond to mental health within this time. I'll share those.
That's what I was going to say.
Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've noticed that obviously since we've gone on via Zoom, we've been reaching out to more communities since we've gone on Zoom. So once we go back to normal, whenever that will be, then obviously LGBT Sparse Court, we're going to have our monthly meetings, but we're going to adapt to Zoom as well to reach out to the community that can't come to these meetings, because we've had a new person that connected with us. He's on Facebook. He was a Muslim lad and he was very isolated. He didn't know anybody, and we've connected via Facebook, and he come to the group and he said, thank you to you guys, I'm going to start coming to your group. And he was very isolated. So I think it's a good way, this Zoom, to connect with different cultures and backgrounds from the LGBT community. And we've opened it up to everyone. It's mainly LGBT plus, but like I said on the poster, but we've opened it up to everyone due to the coronavirus. So I think this Zoom chat is fantastic, reaching out to, we've reached out to people in Manchester, different organisations, Coventry, Wales, and I think this modern technology, we're all adapting to it, and it's fantastic, I think.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Paul. I think Shaz had a question as well. Did you, Shaz? You were making a good point about different faith groups and how they were reacting. So we'll come to you next, if that's okay.
Hi, everyone. It was just that I just wanted to see, how do you think places of faith have changed their ways at the moment of dealing with the mental health, because there is obviously a rise in it, and do you still think that there's a lot of stigma attached to it, that it's not spoken about much in congregations or generally in certain cultures? And how do you think that should change, or how can we speak to or approach those places of faith to actually take it in a bit more and say it exists, acknowledge it, and speak about it to your congregation? Especially at the moment with, say, okay, still do Zoom things on Zoom, or as places of faith are slowly opening up again, it's something that we need to speak about.
So I invite Cassius to respond to that, and then go back. So then we'll go on to our next speaker, Qatar, because I think that particular introduction, Qatar's experience as a mental health chaplain, really will also be very useful to hear about in response to your questions there, Shaz. So first Cassius, and then go back, and then Qatar, please hear from you both in response to that question of Shaz and what you want to share with us more generally.
Yeah, I think I'll say two things, Shaz, in response to that. Certainly, my experience as a Christian minister is that I'd like these issues to be part of the ongoing conversation and work that we do as a church in our communities, making the most of things like Mental Health Week. Being able to invite organisations in to speak to the congregation. So I'd previously had services with our church where I invited in Wolverhampton. There's an organisation called ACCI who came along and spoke and shared. And I think just making sure that we're keeping those opportunities open so that people know where to access help, know about the resources that are available. But also just following on from what Paul said about connecting with different members of the community via Zoom. I think one of the things that we're learning as churches is, lots of people are keen to regather and to get back into church buildings, but we've also recognized that we're able to reach people differently through these kind of forums like Zoom and other online platforms. And my hope is that those will continue even after we regather. So there may be people who have been more isolated, have found it difficult to come to a church building perhaps in the past, or a place of faith, who would be more willing to be able to access support and feel connected to a community through these kind of platforms. But yeah, I'd certainly need this to be part of an ongoing conversation, and lots more that we can do.
Go backs.
Yeah, hi, Shaz, thank you very much for raising that very valuable question. I think that it's so important that we're able to keep these conversations going, being able to connect, being able to bring mental health into places of worship. That's something that we've been doing over the last couple of years. The chaplaincy service, I mean, it will be so great to connect with Qatar, because that's where we first went when we had a long 2-year battle to embed culturally adapted dementia services for generations, where our memories are like Windrush memories, this idea that we journey back. But actually, I think that for me, essentially, it's not just about Mental Health Week, because in those times to get places like ACCI, Alicia, her team, they're fantastic, but to get them in during Mental Health Week when they are so busy is such an extensive challenge. But I would say that we need to keep those conversations going throughout. We did a very small project, David, with Shaz, to look at bringing mental health into places of worship. And I think it's about working together collectively, being respectful of religion, of those beliefs, and stepping tentatively with those places of worship, the congregations, and actually opening up that conversation to begin to break down some of the barriers, the stigma about the very real thing that does exist, mental health. Only then, collectively, and keeping up that momentum throughout the year, it's only then that we will begin to encourage people to talk, come forward, to get help. But I think within those places of worship, it's also important that we help people to identify what is mental health, what are the signs, what are the symptoms, how can we begin to help people, how can we give them the tools to help themselves, not only through faith but collectively as organizations, as communities. So I think, Shaz, your question is so important. We look at dementia, carers, the amount of strain that's put on individuals, the different types of physical and mental illnesses that come up. It's so important that we be able to open up those conversations within places of faith, because we found when we delivered talks around mental health in places of worship, in that 1 week we went on the BBC and we said our referrals went through the roof, because we believe that that's the first place that people tend to go, is they go back to their faith. So there's an incredible opportunity for us through the work that is being done through Shaz and really with the support of David, is to say, can we open up those avenues? I hear what people are saying about funding. Absolutely. Let's fund organisations to be able to work with places of worship to talk about mental health in the most respectful and connective and collaborative way, so that we don't go in there and think that, you know, mental health is more important than faith or vice versa. It's about working together and supporting people who come to us and maybe need that additional support and that little bit of additional understanding. So I think it's a fabulous question. And it's a great journey that we can all go on together.
Max, thank you so much for that. And that does lead into our next speaker. So if people are able to mute themselves, go to Qatar, who was able to speak with us on our first occasion and gave a very valuable perspective there. And now he's able to draw on his experience as a mental health chaplain in particular. So Qatar, thank you very much. Really looking forward to what you've got to say to us today.
Thank you very much, David. It's wonderful to be back and joining everyone on this chat to go through some of the questions and challenges that we face as a society individually around mental health, around well-being, around finance. And you know, some of the questions that we've had have been really positive, really thoughtful. One of the questions that was asked was, if you're asking a friend, you know, what kind of basic things can you do to look after your mental health? And the first thing I would say is, don't watch the news all the time. I think that constant bombardment of information can just feed anxiety. You know, fix the amount of input that you're getting. That, you know, if it makes you worry, just reduce the amount of information that you're getting. Spend time focusing on things that make you feel positive, make you feel good, connect with people. You know, I think particularly in isolation, I was in hospital yesterday talking to a gentleman who'd come in for a 24-hour heart monitor, and he was struggling with his mental health, about being at home, not being able to connect with people, time going really slowly, and just feeling very low in himself. And all he can think about is the fear and anxiety of life. And I think there's a real need for mental health to be embedded within all parts of our society, within our work culture, within our home lives, within our faith and community buildings. I think there has been a change over the last few years in terms of now being more positive in responding towards mental health, recognizing it, and looking at important interventions that can take place, and particularly culturally sensitive interventions. I know there's great work. I am from Leicester. We are still in lockdown. And I do recognize the stigma and labeling that, you know, came out straight away to say, who is this to blame on? And I think that in itself is a very unhelpful narrative. But in Leicester, in our good boroughs, we have got alcohol awareness and support, working with our community in a way that understands the dynamics of our community, the needs of its members, but also responds in a way that people feel comfortable themselves in approaching and going to these sessions. So I think culturally sensitive responses towards mental health and its challenges is vitally important. We have to talk the language of the communities that we are serving. And so you can frame in a context that makes sense to people. And there was a wonderful point earlier, recognizing that mental health affects all people. It's not just something that people have, and you know, as professionals or leaders in communities, we're immune from it. And it's one of the things I always value sharing with my patients, particularly in mental health settings, is that mental health is a spectrum, and we're all on that. We're all on that mental health journey. And some days we have good days, and some days we have challenging days. And it's about how we work through our day, how we build our resilience, and how we build structures within our day and our life and routines that help us in having a positive mental health outlook and experience in life. And for me, faith is a huge part of that mental health journey, making sense of life, you know, dealing with the challenges that life throws at you, but also how we respond and consider ourselves in the context of a relational life. Life is not lived in a silo. We live with other people. We live in that constant interaction with the world, but also being in touch with ourselves. And for me, the relationship with money is a very interesting one, because I think initially when you think about the question about money and mental health, there are some basic knee-jerk reactions that you have about the relationship. But money itself is, it's a concept, it's a construct. It's more than just this idea of having cash in your pocket. It means very key things to how our life functions and how we live. And some of the thoughts that I had around this were that money symbolizes for many people basic survival needs: food, shelter, warmth, energy, medicine. And these are core things that every human being needs to exist. If you go to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at your base, you have the, I think I was muted, but I've recognized I'm just come back on. So basic survival needs are essential for every human being. And if you don't have those basic needs, you can't think about fulfillment in life and joy in your experience. You're too busy fighting to make sure that there's food on the table, that you have a roof over your head. And that in itself is a core fundamental to life. You can't think beyond those basic needs if they're not met. It's a sense of dignity. It's one of the things in society where people will treat you differently based upon how you dress and how you present yourself and what you look like. And there is a lot of judgment that happens in society, particularly with a lot of our mental health patients. There is a real need for their appearance to look right so that they feel they'll be valued in society. But equally, there's great vulnerabilities about their appearance and how other people perceive them, whether they see their poverty and whether they will treat them in the same way that they would someone, driving a expensive car and in a fancy suit. And I think there is that real sense of dignity that we have, that money represents for a lot of people, that as someone without money, that their worth and their value is deemed lesser. And I think this is, again, a core sense of a person's mental health and well-being. There's a sense of security. If you have a sense of security moving into the future, that you know your basic needs will be provided, you will survive, you can have a hope for the future, you can make plans, you can think about the things that you want to do in your life. But if you have a great fear and anxiety about what the future holds, it's very difficult for you to focus on making plans and therefore constructing your life journey in a particular way. And I think that's very relevant now when we look at the coronavirus and the way in which many people have found themselves either out of work, on furlough, or in difficult circumstances where their businesses are not running and they are financially struggling. A very good friend of mine, he works in boiler repair, and he said, right at this moment in time, I've been dipping into my savings. I've had no clients, or very limited clients, because we can't go out and about into housings. And life is tough. And for him, that is now his main focus, is how do I make sure I have money coming in so that I can have a sense of security. But also, I think money has a connection with an experience of well-being and enjoyment in life. Life, without worrying for your basic needs, you can then focus on the things that actually bring you joy. And for many people, it sometimes is, in the ability to go out for a coffee with your friends, or go out for a meal and spend however much money on a meal. Those are some of the basic enjoyments that people will experience. And yet many people who don't have that capability will feel that their experience and sense of enjoyment in life is really restricted. And your ability to pursue your passions is hindered by the fact that you don't have the financial resources. And lastly, I would say money is a means of looking after others and being responsible for maybe your family, your parents, your elderly, who need support, or your children, or those people that you have responsibility for. Money is about your ability to provide and care for the people around you. And when these core aspects of any person's life are rattled or shaken or broken, it's very hard for them to deal with the anxiety of the very real needs that they have in life. It's not a mental construct at that time. If you don't have food on the table, it is a direct worry. It's something that you'll physically and mentally experience. It can lead to things like anxiety, increased levels of stress, increased levels of fear, hopelessness. And highlight your own vulnerabilities, and all of those mental health challenges that are experienced are rooted in real needs of people. And I think this is where there are two levels of response, I would say, from a Sikh perspective, in addressing these core needs and making sure that people have their basic needs provided for, so that they can have a sense of security in life, and from that foundation then flourish, rather than being in a constant battle of trying to fulfill the basic needs of life so that you can survive and exist. And I root it back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who was the founder of the Sikh faith, and the 3 golden rules that were established at the time. And I think they all relate to mental health in different ways. And Nam Japo, which is meditate, contemplate, and live a conscious life, is again about reflecting on your mental well-being, being in touch with yourself, and working on your sense of well-being and resilience. Vanshako, it's about sharing in society so that you transform the world around you. Whatever it is you have to give, give with an open and generous heart. But the golden rule I'm going to focus on today is Dharam di Kirt Karni, more commonly known as Kirt Karo. But Dharam di Kirt is the wider expression used for this. And there are 3 interpretations I would probably share of what Dharam di Kirt is. Firstly, working in a righteous job, so meaningful work that gives you a sense of achievement, a sense of responsibility. It's an ethical choice. It's not impacting on anyone in a way that is exploitative, and it's earning your living in a way that you are contributing back to society in a way that's not harming others. And I think sometimes it's recognizing it's not just well-paid, high-flying jobs that are in this expression of Dharam di Kirt, working a righteous job. One of my favorite reminders that I often will say is to housekeeping staff. In a hospital structure, you have consultants, you have chief executives, you have all sorts of professions in there. And yet the housekeeper who comes in very quietly, cleans the floors, makes sure things are kept in a clean and hygienic way, the environment is in that, has that level of cleanliness. Without that person, that member of staff, the entire hospital itself would crumble. And it's about reminding people from whatever profession that they're in, that their work has real value and it's a contribution to the whole. And it's recognizing that this is a righteous job in itself, just in the way that being a doctor and providing medical care to a patient is a righteous job, just in the way that being a nurse is a caring job. And all the jobs in between that are done, it's part of being in a meaningful, righteous whole within society. Dharam di Kirt could also be looked at as working hard and honest. So your work ethic, how you work in life, the work that you do, are you putting in your 110%? Are you making a personal contribution to the environment, the work environment that you're working in? And there's something about knowing your contribution in a day. When you've given your 110%, there is a sense of satisfaction in that. There is a sense of mental well-being. There's a sense of achievement in that. And that in itself is a positive tool for having a positive mental health day. It's reminding yourself that you've made a positive contribution, that you've done your best, and I think that in itself is another way in which Dharam di Kirt, the idea of working honestly and working hard and working righteously, links to a sense of mental health and well-being. And thirdly, I would say Dharam di Kirt is reflecting on work as part of a righteous living. It's about furthering your spiritual and social and personal and religious responsibilities in life. You're working not just to fulfill your basic needs, but also as a contributor towards a wider society, about establishing a way of living in which we can support one another, where we begin from the sense of you work and you give your 110% to dealing with the challenges of your day. And I think this goes in contrast with, I think, a point that was raised earlier, in the sense of we believe that the Almighty is the provider of all things, and all things that are destined for us will be given to us, and no one can take away that which is destined to be ours. And in some senses, that isn't a call to inaction to say, well, it's God's responsibility to provide. There is a very human responsibility that we have to make sure that we play our part in that process. We do uddam. we make efforts on our own part. Now, changing a bit further to some of the structural challenges I say existed in the society, I think Gurbani Sikh scripture talks very much about our relationship with wealth, with Maya. And it's about redefining our relationship with wealth. At a basic level, everyone needs money and wealth to support their basic needs to exist. But it's going beyond that. It's where does our desire end? Once we've achieved our basic needs, and maybe a few creature comforts, things that we enjoy and make our life comfortable and enjoyable, the danger of going too far down that road is our attachment to wealth, our desire to accumulate inexhaustible wealth, and through which that relationship with money has a danger of enabling someone in their pursuit for wealth to exploit people. I can give the example from Leicester, where the garment industry has come under severe scrutiny for providing poor working environments for vulnerable people who maybe can't find work elsewhere. People are being forced to work in an unsafe environment for less than a minimum wage. It's criminal if we think about it, and yet people will try and, in their furtherance of accumulating wealth, ignore the harm that is being done to people. And those people who are working in those conditions will be suffering mental distress as a process, not just from the danger of working in unsafe conditions, the fact that you are not earning probably enough to provide more than the basic needs of your family or your own basic needs. And in itself, there is a structural challenge, but how do we create a world where there is meaningful work for people, that there is a space for every person to engage in meaningful activity by which they can secure their basic needs? But also alongside that, I think there is a recognition that not everyone starts life in the same financial situation, and that financial inequality may hinder or impact where a person's life journey goes, the opportunities that are available to them. How do we create a structure where inequality and social mobility are increased, and inequality is reduced? And I think this is again looking at how our society functions and supports those that are most vulnerable, because those who are most vulnerable, who have their basic needs lacking, are the core of society that need the most assistance. And I would say that the Sikh response to this comes in several forms. One, Sikhi talks about the sense of median being, our spiritual liberty and our political sovereignty, that these are the two core foundations of the Sikh nation and Sikh community. And that when we look at making sure that everyone's basic needs are provided, it's making sure that no one goes hungry, no one lives homeless, so everyone has a roof over their head. And it's making sure that those basic securities are provided, and that for me is the basis of good mental health, where a person isn't simply existing in a way that they're constantly worrying about either how am I going to survive this week, do I have to trade off buying clothes and buying food for my family, and also have a sense of fear and anxiety about the future. And I think if we build a society where those basic mental health challenges that exist in those basic needs are met, we can then work on how do we help people flourish and be the best that they can be and live a deeply fulfilling life. And to this end, if we go through Sikh history, the gurus were very much about encouraging economic activity. So the gurus themselves founded cities where the economy flourished. People had work to do. People gave their time, developing these cities, building buildings. And the gurus even spent time and money tackling irrigation problems, sanitation problems, because those are the things that people need. People need basic clean water. The gurus spent time eradicating slums, so tearing down slums and building homes that were fit for purpose, that people could live in a way that was wholesome. A person living on the street is struggling with the day-to-day. Where am I going to sleep at night? What am I going to eat? What is in store for me tomorrow? If I get ill, what support structures are there for me? Actually, by building a society that's geared towards creating opportunities for all people is a way in which every person can have enough money so that their basic needs are provided. But on the flip side, what the Gurus also did, they created the concept of the Guru Ka Langar. This was the free communal kitchen. This was an army of volunteers. So if you didn't have any work or didn't have economic employment by which you could provide your basic needs, the Gurus provided your basic needs for you, and you then became a part of an army of volunteers who then did a whole selection of activities by which we help society and improve the lives of others. It gave people a sense of purpose in life, a sense of meaning in life, a sense of positive contribution, all things that are essential to positive mental health. And alongside this, the Gurus also talked about an inner journey that we have, an inner sense of mental health and well-being, and that is in our relationship with life. If we talk about wealth, the Gurus were very keen on refocusing our understanding of what is true wealth, and is true wealth simply money and your financial position in life. There's a wonderful line from the Siddh Gosht, which was a dialogue that Guru Nanak Sahib Ji had with the Siddhs. The Siddhs were a group of highly intellectual, religiously saintly people who were almost at the pinnacle of religious knowledge and understanding. And in this question, this dialogue, Guru Nanak Sahib was asked, what is your trade? What is your merchandise? And Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Saj Vakhar ke hum vanjare. I trade in the merchandise of truth. And that for me is what my life is geared towards. That is the trade and the economic activity that I really want to engage with in this life. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji gave the example in his young age when his father gave him a good chunk of money and said, use this money as an investment to start your own business. And Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, traveled with his friend and companion Mardana to a market to buy some goods and then look to sell them on. And on that journey, he met a group of people who were hungry and starving. And Guru Nanak Sahib Ji went back with all the rations that he had bought, prepared a great langar and fed all of these hungry people. And that for him was this idea of a good bargain in life. And I think this sense of redefining our relationship with money is essential at redefining our relationship with our mental health and well-being, recognizing that without those core structural needs in society being met, that mental health issues for those who particularly are struggling with poverty will always exist. How do we build that structure? But also internally, those people who are living abundant lifestyles, who have more than enough in life, how do we create a sense of satisfaction and contentment in their life, a sense of abundance, so that instead of pursuing more wealth, there is a sense of gratitude in life, that you appreciate all the things that you have. And I think that mindset of gratitude, of abundance, it transforms the way that you think and you live. You may have just a simple shadda, a simple roti, a simple chapati, and maybe some salad to go with it. But from a mindset of abundance and a mindset of gratitude, that will be a feast. And I think there's something about helping people engage with their mental health in a way that changes the narrative from a mindset of fear and anxiety to a mindset of abundance and positivity. And that can only be done is when we address those core structures in society and we address the core fundamental human needs that exist. And the last reflection I will give, for me, our relationship with money and our structural society that we have around wealth and poverty and mental health, it's about how do we build a society and a world that we would like to live in. And I think that if we build that as a core of our society, a core of our relationship with wealth, and a core in our responsibility to society, we will start eradicating some of those core challenges that those particularly in poverty feel around mental health, and those who are quite happy living financially in a secure position, that their relationship with wealth becomes one that they don't go into some very dangerous territory when it comes to this love and desire for wealth and money, that may lead to the exploitation, the subjugation, and the harm of those people who are less fortunate than us. Thank you.
Brother Qatar, thank you very, very much indeed for sharing so much there that will have resonated with so many people. I saw lots of folks nodding as you were talking, so we're really, really grateful for that. We're at this stage going to have somebody from a Muslim background able to come and be our speaker. She's had to go for a medical appointment, so can't join us. So I was going to ask three very simple questions of our good friend and colleague Shaz Akhtar, and ask her just from her own personal experience if she's able to contribute as well, just to make sure that that particular perspective is there. Shaz, just to ask you these three questions, to say that I was very grateful at the end of Ramadan just to learn from you something about how your prayer during that time had impacted yourself and your family. So just looking at your own Muslim faith, Shaz, in what way do you think your faith informs your attitude towards mental health?
I think my faith enables me to have a positive outlook to life. Like in times of uncertainty in my life, I always lean towards my faith. So, for example, quite recently, as my team is aware, my nan passed away, and it was my faith in knowing that she's in a better place that has helped me overcome that anxiety and stress that I had. And I always talk to people, regardless of what faith they are. I have a really good link with the vicar who always supports me and guides me during my times of uncertainty. And I always talk to Gerbax and Paul, just the people around me, to guide me and support me during these uncertain times.
Shaz, thank you very much indeed. And I know that to be true what you said, because I've been there with you at those times. What about how your faith informs your attitude towards finance, towards money? How, as a Muslim, does that help shape your thoughts around money?
I think it shapes my thoughts around money. We have something that called zakah, so we give a certain percentage of charity every year to the poor. I think it's 2.5%. So I tend to give mine during Ramadan. But financially, I've been very blessed in my life, even through my childhood and even now. But however, I do know so many people across the Black country who I've supported during their difficult and financial uncertainty. And I think Brother Qatar mentioned this, that money is important in life. It dictates how we function in society. And if we don't have enough money, we can't make ends meet. So whether that's paying the rent, the bills, putting food on the table, and quite naturally that will have an impact on our mental health, mental well-being. But I think the speakers have covered this really well. So yeah.
Thank you for that as well. And just that final question then to say, from your own faith tradition, you've covered this a little bit, from your own faith tradition, are there any particular practical ways of being a Muslim or practicing being a Muslim that support you during times of anxiety or times of financial uncertainty? Anything in the rhythm of being a Muslim that helps you during periods of anxiety or financial uncertainty?
I think for me, is the charity is a big thing. When I'm struggling with myself, I always, for example, when Nan passed away, I donated a well in behalf for her impact in a very deprived country. So I always give in charity because I feel like if I can help others and that makes me feel better. I always recite the Quran and understand it better. I always reflect on myself and see how I can come out of this better. Because I always feel that if I believe in myself, my faith teaches me to believe in myself. So no matter what you're going through, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So that's how I tend to look at uncertain situation. I hope that was useful.
That's really super. Thank you. And thank you for standing in at short notice and sharing something of your own heart. And everybody here, I'm sure, really appreciates you as a person. So giving us a bit of insight into your life. Thank you for that very much. It's a time now for people to be sharing some of their own questions. And what I thought I'd do is I'd let perhaps 2, 3, 4 people raise a question, make a point, and then I'll come back to Qatar and yourself, Shaz, in case you want to say anything in response to what they've said. But go first to Kath. Kath, you've got a question. Would you like to share your question with the rest of us?
I was mostly thinking about what Qatar was saying about how it's so difficult to address mental health problems when your basic survival needs are under threat, and how that's going to only increase as we're in this period between going into an economic downturn and hopefully sort of rebuilding something that's more positive for everybody. So I was just wondering if anyone had any thoughts about how we as faith communities can position ourselves to support people through this transition period, really.
So Kath, that's a really important question, that what we as faith communities can be doing at the moment. So we'll hold on to that question, come back to the others in a moment. Shaz Hafiz has got a question or a comment she wants to make from the perspective of Islam. Shaz, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, it was just to add on to what Shaz had said, really, in regards to giving charity and zakat. In Islam, there's obviously the saying of you should want for others what you want for yourself. And if that's how you live, there shouldn't actually be any poverty, and that's what we believe in Islam. That through giving zakat and through giving sadaqah or charity generally, we would bring up the poorest to the same standard, more or less, than what we have ourselves. And as Qatar and everybody else mentioned earlier, if everybody has what the basic needs, once they are covered, I think it's the same for any point of like any faith, it's the same. Once we have our basic needs like food, a home, clothes, everything, our mental health would be actually good enough to focus on other things. And once we get to that point, really, or everybody gets to that point, there wouldn't be as much mental health as there is at this point in the world, because there is poverty. Even in a country like the UK, we're seeing more and more people who are living below the line of poverty, really, and it shouldn't be like that, not in today's day and age, where we do have people who are living well above what is even considered luxurious, and they're millionaires. And you know, that point of giving in charity doesn't seem to be the case with the ones that have it the most. So again, from a point of Islam's point of view in Islam, there shouldn't really be any poverty if everybody was to give their zakat and would look at others who are less fortunate and give to them what they have for themselves, really. So it's just a point I wanted to make.
Shaz, that's really important. Thank you very much indeed. Our friend Adiyinka from Liverpool's got a comment to make.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for their contributions and for the sharing, and just to say the question that was put on just before Shanaz came up and spoke was around what we from faith communities can do. And I think one of the greatest gifts that we have actually is our time and our desire. Shanaz, you mentioned beforehand about people doing what they can and doing what they should be doing. When mentioning Zadka, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I hope you don't feel offended. But about giving alms and giving charitably, and before, Shaz, you mentioned about giving to charity and knowing that helps you feel better in yourself as well. One of the things that we have as faith communities is a perspective on humanity, morality, on God and society that wants to include people, that wants people to grow and develop and be greater than they currently are, and to be what we have as a knowledge of truth that God sees them as being. And we then, because we have that perspective and we have our time, we can look to resources and we can point them towards resources. I think one of the things that we have is that responsibility of being signposts, being huts on the byway of blessedness, where people are on the journey of life, and they can just take a little stop at a hut on a byway when it's hot, and they can take some shade, they can take a bit of a drink or some sustenance, and have someone say, from here, where are you going to? Right, this is a path that you can take. And be that a spiritual path, or a path that helps them in their mental health and well-being, or equally a path that helps them in their physicality, because we know that a lot with physical health also supports mental health as well. And things like, you know, what the Just Finance Foundation has developed, which is the COVID cash course, helping people to understand and take real control of their finances, which then has a significant impact on their mental health as well. And we can point people towards those resources. Forums like this, I will stop in a moment. Thank you for listening to me. But forums like this, I think, are really important, whereby we keep sharing, whereby we keep being willing and open to hear from other people from different faiths and different, you know, even within our own faith backgrounds, from different contexts. Because we all, you know, some people might live in affluent areas, and they have different perspectives and different challenges with regard to finances, and some people might live in less affluent areas. But continuing to share and continuing to be open to learn and develop, that is what will release the floodgates of blessing across all communities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very much indeed. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Cassius. He's got a question to ask, but also, Cassius, you may want to respond to any of the things that have been said previously, and then do ask your question, because I'm then going to follow on to Qatar and ask him for his final thoughts and reflections. Gobak's definitely asking you for anything you'd like to say in response to what we've heard. Shaz Akhtar, coming back to yourself, one of our real hosts for your own both personal and your work perspective for all we've shared. Then we're going to try something that's going to, if it works, it's great. We're going to see if Cassius can actually play that song that clearly meant so much to him. And we might all just enjoy that together. At the end of the song, an opportunity for just final thoughts as we come to an end. But Cassius, what was your question? And then any responses within that to what people have just recently said.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thank you, Shaz and Qatar, for your presentation. I thought that was really excellent and thought-provoking. My question really is recognizing the circumstances that we are anticipating coming through lockdown, and just reflecting on the point as well that Adi Inka was making. How you feel about the financial structures that exist, and whether you see this as an opportunity actually to reframe our financial structures and the way that things work currently, and what some of that readjusting may be. So, for example, one of the things that I've really reflected on just from what you were sharing earlier is those housekeepers in the hospitals who are doing amazing work keeping the hospitals clean. Whether we can be campaigning to make sure that more people enjoy a living wage in this country, so they do have access to the finance to make sure that there is at least food on the table, that there is heating in their homes. Yeah, so I will stop there. But yeah, just wondered about your reflections on that, my brother.
Cassius, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to invite Qatar to respond to your question and the other comments that have been made. Brother Qatar, thank you very much. Anything you'd like to say at this moment?
That is a very deep question, and there is, in my mind, a whole host of potential changes and reviewing the current financial institutions that we have and the financial structures, the relationship between power and wealth. I think there are major questions in the structure within which we live. And my nephew is an economist, and he sometimes in our conversations about the economy, it is very complex in many ways, and yet it's how do we look at the outcome of this financial structure. I think globally we have seen a reduction in poverty, but a growth in the wealth gap. And so I would say, from a very practical perspective, I think major institutional systemic change within financial institutions is hard done, and it usually comes about at the end point of major upheaval. I think COVID has been a real shake-up in our social and political landscape, and I would say in our economic landscape. I think there is definitely a need for us as society to review the relationship that we have, the way that we treat the most vulnerable in society, but also enable and empower those who are in financially or socially the most vulnerable positions, so that they have the opportunity to excel. A great example I can give, so I'm a governor at a primary school here in Leicester, and one of the things that have been really key to look out at is the educational attainment and support structures that exist for children who are at home, particularly in year one and reception years, when they are at their most formative years. And this time in their life is so essential that it will fundamentally change the trajectory of their life based upon their development and their skills and their ability in life. And research that I read, well, it was an article that I read, talked about how families who are living with higher indices of poverty were much more likely to have worse outcomes for their children during lockdown, because they don't have the facilities for their children to receive the support and education that they need, which in itself will result most likely in their economic development and potential in life to be hindered. So I think there are small wins in society that we can look at that would be maximally beneficial in helping particularly those in greatest poverty. I think structural change is huge, and I think it will take a lot of time and a lot of rethinking and a lot of major upheaval. I think small wins like living wage, looking at those people in highest levels of poverty, making sure that there's quality homes and accommodation for people, that people are not in exploitative jobs. I think these are some of the core issues on the ground that as a society we can come together and start working on tackling. But it is a huge question, and I don't think there is a simple answer, but I think every life that we make a difference with, every small change that we make will actually impact on hundreds of lives, if not thousands of lives. And for each of those people, that would be a blessing.
Thank you very much indeed. Go back to any final thoughts from yourself at this stage.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key things is that the structural changes we talk about, we all know about, and that's a long-term plan. In every community, we have wonderful places of worship that people go to seek comfort, to seek that support. And it's actually about those places of worship now collectively working with other partners, other organisations, mental health organisations, and saying, right, what can we do to support the pockets of community, to connect them all together collectively, and actually find out whether we could work with the CAB, mental health organisations, food banks, people who may want to go to their local place of worship and donate food items to support other people, or have information or resources that they can share, things for the home. I think that if we are able to open up our places of worship, maybe 1 day, 2 days a week, and actually distribute what we have to share with them, whether that's information, food, household items, whatever it is, let's open up our places of worship to actually reach out into the heart of our communities, to begin to give people that hope, that comfort, some of those basics that we need. There are larger organisations that those places of worship can connect with to feed in, to start those conversations at a wider, higher strategic level. But I think it really does begin with our places of worship. Myself, growing up, I'm a Sikh. I come from a Sikh background. I would also go with my African Caribbean neighbours into their churches every weekend. But actually growing up, every week we had Mr. Parker who came to our home. I know that he's passed away now, but as a child, we had weekly Bible readings, and Mr. Parker actually taught us to read and write Punjabi. So he was a Christian missionary from India. So what a wonderful way in which my life has been coloured. I've been so lucky to have a wonderful interactions with so many people, and last year with Shaz in the mosques, and being able to connect more on a wider level. But actually, faith, the connection between all of those faiths is the key to how we begin to support people's mental health. Financially, we can make a huge contribution, even if our contribution is small. But by connecting, working together, I think collaboratively, we can have a huge impact. And actually, what better way to connect people back to their faiths and their local places of worship is knowing that in their time of need, they could turn to their local churches, their local places of worship, and actually that was their guiding light. I think we have a great opportunity to say that where we have seen secularization, we have seen people disconnect from their faith, this is a great way in which we can connect those people back to their faith. So if we're going to start that journey somewhere, let's start with our places of worship. I don't have a great deal to say, but that is my vision, and it's been a wonderful journey for me, and I'm so glad that I was able to connect with everybody in this room, and thank you all so much, because actually this has been an immense impact on my mental health, and it gives me that that joy, that spirit to go out and go and say, how else can I help people? We've got some wonderful volunteers, people, you know, we've heard about Zakar and giving back to our communities. Let's utilize that. I used to love going to my local church, having a cup of tea, having cake baked by some of the most wonderful older generation people, and I loved it. You know, pink tea in my local mosque, I love that. We've had neighbours who have moved in and we've shared cups of tea, and it's been wonderful. So let's connect through faith. Let's open up those doorways, and let's look at how we can fund those places to actually connect with their local communities and bring people back where we know that we can offer an immense amount of support. And thank you all for everybody for listening, and thank you everybody for connecting everybody in this forum, and for bringing faith, finance, and mental health as a primary concern back within this forum, and saying, how can we help people?
Thank you so much there, Gurbaks. And just Shaz, just any final thoughts of yourself as one of those who've brought us all together today?
Yeah, I think I have to start with what Gurbaks has just said. Totally agree with the Gurbaks. That was one of our projects, wasn't it, where we wanted to create spaces within our places of worship. And I really hope to really look at that post-COVID, because I think it's much needed. I think the speakers have covered it so well, but a personal reflection and what I will be taking away from listening to all the speakers and contributions that have been made from the participants is that it's very important that we lean towards our faith when going through times of uncertainty. But it's as important that we talk to people around us, regardless of what faith they may serve. I think united, we are stronger, and collectively, hand in hand, we can come out of the difficult times in our lives and come out stronger. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Shaz. Thank you to everybody who's contributed in any way, and thank you for those who put messages on chat. What we're going to do is we're going to come to the end of this session. If you do have other topics around faith and finance, we've focused on mental health today, but if there are other topics you'd like us to address, please do pass your recommendations into whoever your point of contact is, and we'll alert you all to what we're going to do next time. But how I thought we'd actually end is to go for that bit of music that's been a great inspiration to Cassius, from a fellow minister who's had quite a lot of difficulties and troubles around mental health early on in his life, and has been able to come through. And Cassius, I'm sure what is an inspiration to you will be an encouragement to all of us as we come to the end of a very valuable session together. Thank you for
So you leave me and my tears become my me. I was hanging around waiting saying fuck you. A cocoon becomes my womb after the struggle, but I fly after the struggle, but I rise after the struggle, but I fly after the struggle. Plant my feet on a rose tree, climb